She could still hear the echo of his boots long after he'd stormed off. The man she was forced to call her husband, the man she never wanted. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from a rage she could no longer bury. Deep within, the spark that man tried to snuff out still flickered. Her wrists stung, the coarse rope biting into her flesh. Her dress hung in shreds, torn in the struggle, streaked with mud and blood from the bruises on her arms and thighs. In the fray, she'd fought back fiercely, and the struggle had ripped her skirt away, leaving her vulnerable beneath the tattered dress as she stumbled toward escape. The air in that cramped stone cottage reeked of ale, sweat, and malice. It wasn't a home, it was a cage. Her uncle had engineered this nightmare, a drunkard with nothing left to bet. He'd bartered her future to clear his debts, then looked away as she was dragged off. He didn't even flinch. When the brute left to fetch firewood, she seized her moment. Her fingers scraped at the rope until her nails bled, but she wouldn't stop. With one last pull, she broke free and she ran. Barefoot through the stifling dust, across cracked plains and thorny scrub that clawed at her feet. The brambles snagged what was left of her skirt, carrying it away until only the ragged dress clung to her. The Arizona sun rose high, blistering her shoulders, stealing her breath. Her bare feet bled from thorns and jagged rocks, each step a fight against collapse. She stumbled often, her vision swimming. The memory of his cruel hands kept her moving, and the thought of his return pushed her forward. But she pressed on. Every step carried her further from that torment. Her lungs burned like fire. The horizon shimmered in the heat, taunting her with visions of streams that never appeared. Still she kept going, chasing the faint hope of freedom. Hours later, the endless lands stretched before her. A lone homestead appeared under the merciless sky, its fences weathered and splintered, the windmill creaking in the heat. There a man sat on his porch, hat tilted low, resting in the shade. When he saw her staggering through the gate, he froze. She was young, battered, covered in dust and bruises, her hands still tied behind her back, her dress barely holding together. He dropped his mug, rushed forward, and caught her just as her knees buckled.
"Easy now," he said gently. "You're safe here." He cut the rope from her wrists and helped her into his chair, noticing her tattered state. He quickly shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the sun and curious eyes. But before he could ask anything, she turned her gaze to the horizon, eyes wide with dread. "Get inside. First," she gasped. The old rancher's chest tightened. He didn't know who she was or what she'd fled, but he could feel danger riding the dust on that road. Who was chasing her, and what would he do when the past she escaped came knocking? Amos carried her inside, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. The air in his cabin was still and dry. He laid her on an old bench near the window. The light from outside fell across her face. That's when he saw it, the bruises, the rope burns, and the fear that still held her breath captive. He poured water into a tin cup and held it out. "Here, drink slow." Her hand trembled as she sipped. When she tried to speak, her voice broke. "I didn't want to marry him. He said I was his to claim, that I was his debt." Amos looked away, jaw clenched. He'd seen men like that his whole life, men who thought coin made them kings. He went to the corner, opened a dusty trunk, and pulled out one of his shirts. It was clean, faded from the sun, and soft from years of wear. "Here, put this on," he said softly. It's a bit big, but it's yours for now. He wasn't used to kindness anymore. Life had worn most of it out of him, but something about her shaking hands stirred the man he once was. When she looked at him, there was something brittle in her eyes, like she wanted to trust him, but couldn't yet. Outside, the windmill groaned, a slow rhythm filling the quiet. Amos sat across from her. "You got a name, miss?" She paused. "Lila," she said softly. "Lila Jane." He nodded. "Well, Lila, you found the right gate to stumble through."
She tried to smile, but couldn't. Her shoulders shook. Amos didn't press her. He just sat there, watching the dust drift through the light, letting her breathe. For the first time since she'd fled, she felt a whisper of safety. Not the kind that came with walls, but the kind that lived in someone's quiet presence. Still, her eyes kept darting to the door. Every creak made her flinch. Every sound outside reminded her of him, the man she escaped, the man who wasn't finished yet. Amos noticed. He set his cup down and said quietly, "You're safe here, I swear it." But the way she stared at the window told him what he already suspected. She didn't believe him, not yet. Because somewhere out there, on that scorching Arizona trail, a horse was drawing closer, and whoever rode it wasn't coming in peace. Amos had seen storms before, but never one like this. The wind outside shifted, the kind of wind that carries trouble in its bite. Lila sat near the window, still wearing his old shirt. Her hair hung loose, her eyes locked on the horizon. She didn't speak, but her hands wouldn't stay still, twisting together, like she was holding herself together. Then they both heard it. Hooves, slow at first, then heavier, closer, a lone rider. Amos stepped onto the porch. The man on the horse stopped at the gate. It was him, the one she'd fled, face flushed, eyes wild, and liquor heavy on his breath. "Where is she, old man?" His voice cracked the air like a lash. Amos didn't budge. "She's safe now. Turn that horse around and ride off, before I lose my temper." The man sneered. Amos stepped forward, his voice low but steady from years of facing tougher men. "I've handled worse than you. Test me." With a swift move, honed from old soldier days, he disarmed the man before a punch sent him sprawly.
"She's mine," the man spat, "paid for fair and square." Amos's eyes narrowed. "You don't buy people, mister, not on my land." The rider lunged toward the porch. Amos met him halfway. No guns, no warning, just one hard swing that sent the man face first into the dirt. When he tried to rise, Amos kicked his gun away and pointed to the road. "Go, before you leave more than your pride behind." The man spat blood, stumbled to his horse, and shouted through gritted teeth, "You'll regret this. I'll be back with the law." Amos didn't reply. He just watched him ride off, dust rising like a warning from hell. Back inside, Lila stood trembling. She'd seen men fight before, but never for her. Amos walked in quietly, wiped the sweat from his brow, and poured 2 cups of water. "Don't worry, he won't get far, not today." Lila wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. For the first time, she felt like someone had chosen to stand between her and the darkness, but deep down she knew the man would return, and next time, he wouldn't come alone. Outside, the sun began to sink behind the hills. The windmill's creak returned, slow, steady. Lila finally breathed, but the air still felt heavy, like the calm before another storm. Amos looked out the window, voice low. "Trouble's not done with us yet." So what happens when the law rides in and the truth meets the dust? If you're still with me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. And while you're here, grab a cup of tea or coffee. Let me know what time it is where you are and where you're listening from. I'd love to know who's out there riding with us tonight. By dawn, the homestead was quiet again. Too quiet. Amos barely slept that night. Neither did Lila. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind felt like a warning. Around noon, they heard it. 2 horses this time. The first carried the man from yesterday. The second carried the law. Amos stepped outside, hand resting near his hip, not on a gun, just steady. Lila stood by the window, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. The sheriff dismounted first. Tall, gray-haired, with a badge dulled by years of dust. It was Marshal Boone, Amos's old war comrade, the only man he still called friend. They'd fought together, shared scars and silence, and Boone knew Amos's word was iron. "Morning, Amos," Boone said. "Morning, Sheriff," Amos replied, slow and calm.
The man beside Boone cut in. "This old fool struck me, took my wife and kept her here. I want her back. The law's on my side." His voice was sharp, thick with liquor and arrogance. Amos didn't answer. He just looked at Boone. Boone took off his hat, sighed, and turned to Lila. "Ma'am, is that true?" Lila stepped from the doorway. Her face was pale but firm, her hands still trembling. "No," she said, voice shaky but clear. "I was never his wife. He tried to force me. I ran before he could." Boone studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to the man. "You got proof of marriage?" The man's jaw twitched. "Don't need paper. Everyone knows." "Stop right there," Boone cut in. "In this county, we don't trade women for debts. Right out before I teach you the difference between law and shame." The man's face reddened, his words caught between rage and fear. He spat into the dirt, then climbed onto his horse. "I'll remember this, old man," he growled, glaring at Amos. Boone just said, "Ride far enough so we don't have to remember you, too." For a long moment, no one spoke. Even the horses seemed to heed the silence, as if the land itself had taken a side. As the sound of hooves faded into the hills, Lila let out a breath she'd been holding for days. Her eyes filled, not with fear time, but with something new, relief. Boone looked at Amos and grinned. "You always did attract trouble." Amos chuckled softly. "Maybe trouble just keeps finding me." Lila stood there, hands clasped, lips parted like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. For the first time, she didn't look lost. She looked like she belonged. But peace never lingers long on a homestead like that. And sometimes the hardest fight isn't the one you win. It's the one that creeps in after dusk. What happens when that peace begins to crack? That night the homestead was quiet again. The air smelled of dust, wood smoke, and rain that never fell. Amos sat on the porch, oil lamp flickering beside him. Inside, Lila moved softly, her bare feet whispering across the floor, no fear in her step, for the first time since she arrived. One morning she helped Amos mend a broken fence, her hands shaky at first, but steadying as he taught her the knots. The next day he found her a pair of old boots, a quiet gesture that softened her eyes. She brought out 2 cups of coffee, handed one to him, and sat down. The stars shone brighter than they had in years. Neither spoke. They just listened to the night. After a while, Lila said, "Do you ever tire of being alone?" Amos smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "Used to. Then I got used to the quiet. But tonight, I kind of like the sound of company." Lila smiled for real this time. Not the smile of a frightened girl, but something soft, alive, full of something like peace. In the days that followed, she helped around the homestead. Some mornings she hummed while feeding the chickens, her voice soft as the morning breeze. Amos never said it aloud, but that sound filled the house more than any hymn. She fed the horses, fixed fences, cooked simple meals. Amos taught her how to mend leather, how to ride, how to listen to the land. Little by little, the homestead felt less empty. And little by little, the old man who thought he was done with life began to live again. Sometimes healing doesn't come with medicine. It comes with someone sitting beside you when the world goes quiet. It comes with trust, with kindness, with a second chance you didn't think you deserved. One evening, Lila looked at him and said, "Thank you for saving me." Amos shook his head slowly. "Reckon you saved me, too." The sun sank low, painting the homestead in gold. They sat in silence, a hard-earned peace, fragile but real. Two souls under an Arizona sunset, their silence a bond stronger than words. Time passed. The days slower, softer. They didn't speak of the past anymore. They just lived. And somehow, that was enough. Maybe that's what love really is. Not grand gestures or lofty promises, just staying. Just choosing not to walk away when you could. So, what do you think? Can people start over, no matter how broken they are? Can kindness still change a life? If you believe it, maybe give this story a like so others can find it. And if you want to ride with me through the next tale, hit that subscribe button and join me for another journey across the Old West. Now pour yourself another cup of tea or coffee.